being recorded, and so we will post that, and so you'll have access to that as well. So just a little bit about the Coalition for Smarter Growth. I don't know if all of you, we have a lot of folks here that some of you may not be as familiar with us, but CSG is the leading organization in the Washington, D.C. region dedicated to making the case for smart growth. Our mission is to advocate for walkable, bikeable, inclusive, and transit-oriented communities as the most sustainable and equitable way for the Washington, D.C. region to grow and to provide opportunities for all. We were founded about 25 years ago by leading conservation groups to specifically address the where and how our region grows. And so in that time, we've worked to promote a network of walkable, mixed-use, mixed-income communities near high-capacity transit, also known as transit-oriented development, or you might hear us refer to it as TOD. We're doing this across the region, as we said, as a better way to grow. And in Northern Virginia and in Fairfax County specifically, that's focusing on this type of development at our metro stations and along our aging commercial corridors where we have the enhanced transit to support that. And so, I want to point out, often we will state providing homes near transit is a transportation solution because it reduces our dependence on driving, thereby reducing congestion. But it's also a climate solution since transportation is the region's largest CO2 emissions. And so reducing long commutes by offering more homes near transit and providing better access to active transportation connecting to transit is the best way to go and is a climate solution. So this approach has been embraced both by regional bodies in our area as well as Fairfax County. So what does this look like? So this image here, a better vision for West Falls Church. So on the left, this is what we've got today, these acres of parking lots, underutilized spaces, and we want to create this mixed-use, vibrant community on the right that will provide us better sustainability. So I just want to give you an overview of where we are, sort of what brings us here today. So I think, this whole area of West Falls Church is, there's a lot of different parts to it. We've got the City of Falls Church. They have a project where they just rebuilt the high school and they're going to revitalize the other area where the high school, the older high school once was, into a mixed use development. And that's already approved and under construction. Now the portion between the City of Falls Church and the WMATA station is Fairfax County's territory. And even I think the Virginia Tech property has multiple layers where it's under Fairfax County's purview, but the property is owned by the city. And so this takes a lot of collaboration between these different partners and jurisdictions. So Fairfax County has initiated a West Falls Church TSA, that's Transit Station Area Study, to develop a comprehensive plan recommendations for this area to sort of be more cohesive to what the city is also planning. A community task force was formed and they started meeting back January 15th, 2019. And over the 2.5 years that they've been meeting, they've hashed out a lot of what the draft plan language looks like. They had concerns, they talked it out, county staff worked with them, and just this past April, April 20th, the task force approved the recommendations by a vote of 5-3. And so now we are scheduled. There is a community meeting coming up on May 11th. That's an opportunity to learn more specifically about the project and talk to county staff and representatives who will be there, and also to provide, get your questions answered and also provide your support for this type of development. Then the Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on June 16th and the Board of Supervisors hearings coming up on July 13th. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the draft comp plan amendment and what it says. This is sort of the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of what we're trying to build here. So I don't want to get into too much of this detail because I think Evan will share more about it later, but this is basically what the comp plan amendment will offer to support the vision that the developers and WMATA want for this community as they move forward. But I think what's really important to note here and why these redevelopments can really offer some sustainability, and we talk about this mixed use, inclusive, transit-oriented development, is that there's a lot of co-benefits that go with this. So as an example, you know, in addition to the building of all of that mixed use, these buildings where you have retail and office and homes, new homes, built into this comp plan amendment is also affordable and workforce housing units. So as part of this, there is a certain amount that's set aside so that we have mixed income housing opportunities. It also provides for open space and linear parks and improved stormwater management. And so we saw where that was all parking lot before. Well, that's not really, does not have stormwater management. And if it does, it's pretty poor. So all of that impervious surface can be redeveloped and improved with up-to-date current stormwater management techniques, including green infrastructure. And that has been detailed in the plan amendment as well. And another really important aspect of this is that transit component. So in West Falls Church, you know, this is a major transit area with the West Falls Church Metro Station and a future Route 7 BRT. The planned redevelopment and the comp plan makes accordance for the enhanced grid of streets that will provide better connectivity. There's going to be a new Chestnut Route 7 intersection that will connect to the Commons Boulevard, providing better access and crossing ability across Route 7. They're going to create, as part of that grid, a parallel street, Commons Boulevard. It'll be parallel to Haycock. And there's also a focus on pedestrian and bicycle improvements. So in the comp plan, it talks about improved connectivity to neighborhoods and the surrounding transit station areas, wider walkways along primary pedestrian routes, bicycle facilities throughout the development, street trees, and pedestrian scale lighting. And one of the follow-on, because a lot of the task force members in their communities spoke about the need for better pedestrian safety infrastructure and connectivity into the established neighborhoods in the surrounding areas. You know, county staff really agreed with that. It's a little bit outside of the development itself. So Fairfax County Department of Transportation is recommending, and in the comp plan amendment, language was included to have this follow-on motion for a West Falls Church active transportation plan that will look more cohesively at the bike ped connectivity as it relates to the new development and into the established neighborhoods in the surrounding areas. So with that, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to turn it over to Evan Goldman to share with us his vision of, you know, what they're creating in West Falls Church. So Evan, are you all set? Go ahead. You should be able to share your screen.
Yep, I'm going to do that right now.
All right.
Just let me know once you can see it.
It's up.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you, Sonia, so much for the introduction, and Stuart for allowing us to give this presentation. Really excited to be here tonight. I've been a long time supporter and member of Coalition for Smarter Growth because you guys just support something that's so critical to the area, which is transit-oriented development and affordable housing. The West Falls Station planning area, which Sonia kind of gave you the overview of, I'm going to get into a little bit more details into the various actual projects, the specifics of the projects that are being proposed. And I'm going to talk a little bit also about the high school site, which is in the city of Falls Church, which is not really part of the comprehensive plan amendment, but since it's adjacent, is being planned collectively and holistically. And so that'll give you kind of the bigger picture of the entire area. Important dates coming up, May 11th, as Sonia mentioned, there'll be a community meeting hosted by Fairfax County. And that's a great way to see the county's overview of the entire plan. They'll give a detailed presentation and you'll be able to ask questions to county staff. Planning Commission hearing date is June 16th. And the Board of Supervisors hearing is July 13th. And it's important that folks have their voices heard on all these meetings. If you're an affordable housing advocate, if you're an environmentalist, if you're a bicycle advocate, these are the places where you want to make sure your voice is heard. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the actual area and the different properties involved because it can be a little bit confusing. This is Haycock Road and Route 7 on your screen. The white outlined area is the City of Falls Church, which extends like a little peninsula into the county in this location. And then you have the county properties, which are WMATA and Virginia Tech. And of course, the city redevelopment site, which is where the current George Mason High School sits today. We'll be talking about the WMATA site, which is the 25-acre site right at the metro, as well as the Virginia Tech site, which is about 8 acres. In total, it's 40 acres, fairly underutilized land. The development partners for the WMATA site, I should have introduced myself at the beginning, but I'm Evan Goldman, Executive Vice President, Acquisitions and Development for EYA, where one of the partners of the site will be building some townhomes there as a buffer up against the existing residential. Rushmark is a local developer in Falls Church. If you know the Harris Teeter project in downtown Falls Church, it's a beautiful building that they constructed, and they've done many other great projects. And then Hoffman and Associates is probably one of the best, if not the best, developers in the region. They built, or for urban development, they built the Wharf as an amazing project on the waterfront in DC, and they'll be part of the project as well. Hoffman and EYA are also the developers for the City of Falls Church site. And so when we went to WMATA after starting to work on the city site, WMATA recognized the benefit of having the same partners working on the overall project to make sure that transportation was coordinated, utilities were coordinated, bicycle lanes, development, retail, everything that you'd want to see is being coordinated amongst these partners. And so, as I said, it's collaborative. It's a collaborative approach to building a transit-oriented development. It's a 40-acre site, 1.2 billion of investment, 3 million square feet of development. Significant tax benefit to the state and the county, which is important going forward, given COVID and what that has done to the economics of the region. Some of the anchors, there's 200,000 square feet of retail planned. Virginia Tech is an anchor right in the middle of the site. And then there's an 125,000 square foot medical office building planned on the City of Falls Church site, as well as some other office buildings throughout. So we're building true mixed use here, where you'll have daytime population workers on the site, and then you'll have residents there in the evening, and that really helps the retail to thrive. We're building about 8,000 linear feet of new and upgraded roads that'll help relieve some of the traffic and congestion issues, and we'll talk about that in a moment too in more detail. 24 acres of open space, 6 acres of parks, 10% affordable housing on the county parcels relative to the county's requirement of 8%. So there'll be more affordable housing here as a requirement than most parts of the county. And I'd say for those of you on the phone or on this meeting who are affordable housing advocates, it's this task force process took 3 years until the vote happened about a month ago. It'll take another 2 years to go through the planning and design process to break ground, and probably 2 years after that to deliver. So in all, we're talking 7 years from the time that an idea was had that we should build something great here to the time that you actually have your first residents moving in. And so it's a long battle to get affordable housing in general. And because there's so many battles to get development, that delays the delivery of affordable housing. So if you're an affordable housing advocate, it's really important to make sure your voice is heard over the next few months, because that's something that often gets overlooked. The biggest obstacles delivering affordable housing are people fighting development. As I said, about 3 million square feet in total. Most of that's on the City of Falls Church site. So the city approved a plan about a year and a half ago for 1.4 million square feet, higher density, more retail. And part of that is because it's right on Route 7, whereas Virginia Tech and WMATA will be lower density plans. In total combined, about 1.7 million square feet on the WMATA and Virginia Tech site, which is a 1.7 FAR for those of you who are planning folks. And to give you a sense of scale, right now, the WMATA site, which will get a 1 FAR or a 0.96 FAR, will still be the second lowest dense metro station area in the entire county. So even though, yes, there is more development being proposed here, there was a sensitivity to the existing residents and some of the traffic in the area. And that's why the density being proposed is not astronomical. It's quite reasonable. It's a 1 FAR or 0.96 on the WMATA site and a 2.5 FAR on the Virginia Tech site. And that averages out to 1.7. So this slide really kind of highlights the key way that we're going to solve some of the local traffic and transportation issues. There's more than $75 million of infrastructure being dedicated and built in this area. A portion of that is public, most of that is private. So about 15 million is an MVTA grant that's going to help all the streetscape improvements on Haycock and 7 and improvements in 7 itself, and help us build a new intersection at 7 and Chestnut, which we'll talk about in a moment. MVTA, Virginia Tech and the city were awarded a $10 million grant recently to construct a smart construction road, a smart road, so they can use data analytics to improve traffic and transportation. And that will help them fund the new road on the Virginia Tech site, as well as improvements on the city and the Virginia Tech site. In addition, we have about $30 million of infrastructure to be built on the WMATA site and another 15 million on the high school site. So a ton of new infrastructure in bike lanes, pedestrian improvements, streetscapes, tree pits, stormwater management, underground utilities, brick sidewalks, and all the things that make a place great is being invested in this area for the local community. And the key, as you can see in this plan, the reason this is so important is we need to create a grid of streets so that we can get cars out of the Haycock and 7 intersection. Route 7 in Haycock is probably the biggest issue we have currently in this area from a traffic perspective. Great Falls and Haycock would be the second worst intersection, but Haycock and 7 is a problem today. And what this project allows for is a solution to that issue by creating a grid of streets, particularly for the local folks who know their way around, to be able to avoid that intersection. We worked really hard with the local community, with VDOT, with FCDOT over the last few years to get an intersection with a traffic light approved at Route 7 and the entrance to Commons. And what that does is it allows cars coming southbound on 7 trying to get north of 66 to make that left turn and go through the main street and continue to McLean without waiting on that intersection, that traffic light, which is already backed up. Second to that, the county and the state just built a new connector, which some of you may have seen, which allows cars to get from Route 66 all the way to the metro without those cars having to come to Haycock and make a turn and another turn. And that's taking hundreds of cars out of this intersection on a daily basis, because those cars can now go directly to the WMATA park and ride without going onto your local streets. Those two things combined really help to deal with not just the traffic that's being generated by the project, but the traffic that some of the traffic issues you're having today. More importantly, especially for the residents that live to the south of 7, by creating this traffic light, there'll now be safe bike lanes and a pedestrian connection at Route 7 at the higher elevation, which is where your community is, that'll allow people to, without going all the way down to Haycock, get across safely and be on protected bike lanes and sidewalks all the way to the metro. And what that should do is increase the walk shed of this metro station and hopefully get more people out of their cars over time. This is a design of that intersection. I'm not going to dwell on this, but if anyone is interested in this, I'm happy to follow up after and have further conversation or answer questions. But it's pretty innovative. And essentially what we did was Chestnut Street will be closed as it approaches Route 7, and that will deflect some of the traffic that cuts through the neighborhood today. Sorry, let me close my window. Got a helicopter flying above. And then a new traffic light entrance will be at the shopping center that is there today, and the new project being created. And that allows for a left turn into the project, and equally important, a left turn out of the project. Allows for traffic to still go in and out of the shopping center, but it deflects traffic from coming into the neighborhood. So an important improvement that has been approved as part of the project. Bike circulation, if we have any bike advocates on the phone, there was a lot of attention paid both during the city process and the comp plan on how bikes will get through and to the metro. And so there will be bike lanes along all of the new Main Street being created from Route 7 all the way back to Haycock. There'll be bike lanes from there to the metro as well. At the metro, there'll be bike share as well as bike lockers. So there'll be the ability for people to kind of have a bike, we're going to kind of calling it an urban plaza right at the transit stop, where folks can disembark their bikes and get onto metro. There'll be shared use paths, which are wide, kind of 10-foot broad areas where people can also bike or walk along Route 7, along Haycock, along what's called Mustang Alley, which is the entrance to the new high school and middle school, going back out to Route 7 and wrapping all the way around the property to the metro as well. So there are options. You can do either the shared use paths or bikes, but there'll be many ways to get in and out safely to metro, which will hopefully encourage a lot more folks to take that 10 or 15-minute bike ride to the metro itself. As Sonia had mentioned, as part of the comprehensive plan, the county has agreed to do a follow-on study to look at ways to get people to the site. So the comp plan really focuses on this area we're talking about right now, this triangle, or this kind of half semicircle area. And the next step is to see, well, how do you improve bicycle connections over Route 66 to the single family neighborhoods to the north, since the bridge is so difficult today? How do you improve pedestrian connectivity and bike connectivity along Haycock into the neighborhoods to the south? That follow-on study is expected to start right after the approval of the approval of the comp plan. And so for interested residents on the phone, that's something to pay attention to, especially if you're a cycling advocate. Bus circulation, we worked hard with WMATA and the county to figure out how do you improve on bus times. And so this new plan we've created where the buses don't have to go out onto Haycock and use the Metro Access Road. They've got a shorter turnaround time, and their stations will be right at the Metro now. It cuts about, I'm trying to remember what it was, it's about a 10% reduction in their travel time that they normally would have taken when they exit 7 to get to the Metro and come back out to 7. So it's going to save some actual bus time and speed up the buses a bit. And there will be plenty of bus infrastructure for dedicated stations right at the Metro entrance for those buses to continue, as well as some of the other shuttles that use that area on a daily basis. So now we'll get into the plans themselves. The City of Falls Church site, this project was, the overall entitlement was approved about a year ago. The detailed site plan will hopefully be approved in the next 60 days. That's being worked on with the City Council and the City of Falls Church. And it has a apartment building with a grocery store at Haycock and 7. The grocery store lease has already been executed, so there is a new grocery coming. The office building I already mentioned, the medical office building at the corner here, a hotel, senior housing building that'll have both memory care as well as assisted living, as well as independent living, and a condo building, a really beautiful high-end condo building. The center of the project is this park we call the Commons, which is a pedestrian-oriented space with fire pits and ping pong tables and outdoor yoga and movie nights, a restaurant in the middle of the park. And what's great is all of these streets are lined with retail. So from the second you cross 7, if you're coming from the south, or if you're coming from the north, as you go through the Virginia Tech property, this will be a beautiful retail lined experience. And this will feel somewhat like the park at Mosaic, where there'll be activities going on throughout the weekend and some evenings of the year. And you can see, you can see the bike lanes are the green dedicated bike lanes running up and down the streets as well. These are some renderings of what the high school site's going to look like. And you can see that park space in the center. There's a splash park for kids. There are outdoor swings overlooking the outdoor park space, which you can see here. There's a, let's see, you can see the fire pit right here and the outdoor ping pong table. So it'll be a type of engaging, more of the kind of entertainment focused part of the overall project. This will be the life and activity center with the majority of the retail and the restaurants. And then it gets quieter as you go north into the more residential neighborhoods. And this is a plan of what that park looks like in the latest plan that's been sent to the county, the city. The Virginia Tech site, some of you may have heard that Virginia Tech was planning something pretty large here and exciting. They were going to move their architecture and design school here. And as part of that, build the National Institute of Smart Construction, and then residential on this side of the street, which many of us were very excited about. They have put that on hold and kind of stopped the process to think about strategically what they want to do in Northern Virginia. And so what they've said is they intend to eventually invest here and rebuild. We don't know exactly what the timing will be, but the comprehensive plan does what it should do. It aligns the streets so that street grid will continue through. It creates developable blocks on both sides of the street that have enough density and height that Virginia Tech can do the right thing when the time comes. And of course, the community will be heavily involved in the CDP process when they come in for their development plan. As I mentioned before, there's been a grant of $10 million to the city and Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech has submitted a letter to the county agreeing to allow the road to be constructed prior to their development plan. So that will allow the infrastructure and the roads to go in as part of the overall network, even if Virginia Tech delays their project by a number of years. And then we get to the WMATA site. So this is a site we've been working on for the past 3 years with the county and with the task force. And so number one, there's some townhomes on the south side or southeast side, and that's to buffer the existing residential that sits here today. WMATA is, even though this treed area here is on WMATA's property, they've agreed to save that as a tree buffer between the existing community and the new community. So that's about a 30 to 40 foot wide area with beautiful mature trees running up this entire length. You can see the continuation of the bike lanes running all the way north and going out towards Haycock again. And then the more high-end building, a multifamily building capping the street so that you have the Commons Park, you have the Virginia Tech Plaza, and then you end at this multifamily building. And because we know retail is in transition in our country right now, and it's difficult, there may be retail on this site, but there will definitely be great park spaces and open spaces leading all the way to the metro. So a playground space dedicated for children, an urban plaza at the metro. In a moment, you'll see a dog park that we have planned. So if there are dog advocates on the phone, that's something you might want to learn more about. Oh, sorry, and one thing I didn't mention, Kiss and Ride will be right here in the middle of the site. And the bus loop is coming around, and those bus stops are up against the metro. So it takes the bus and the Kiss and Ride loop out of the center of the site and creates more pedestrian and bike-friendly spaces in those locations. This has also changed a little bit. There'll be some green area and trees hiding the garage as well. So that's a change that's not shown on that current plan. These are some renderings of what's being proposed on the WMATA site. You get a sense for the scale of the building. So townhomes up against the existing community, slightly higher buildings, 5-story apartments above retail or ground floor amenities on the retail side, urban plaza spaces, and then the tallest buildings really being right at the metro, which is an office building and a future residential building. So parks are one of the keys to making this successful. And every developer in the country right now, given where retail is and where we think it's headed, is trying to figure out how do you make great and engaging park spaces that become an anchor in and of themselves. And so we are going to be doing a linear park running all the way from Virginia Tech site to the metro. It'll have engaging elements for play, for exercise, for fitness, seating corrals that make sure that people don't run out into the middle of the street. You can let your kid run around. Stormwater management features that'll be fun and attractive at the same time. There's an array of trees leading right up to the metro entrance, so you'll have a little bit of coverage from rain and from bright sun in the summer. And then also the next page, we have a pollinator garden that we're planning to make sure that butterflies are always in the main central park space, movable furniture to allow people to really control their environment and be in a little bit of a quieter space or meet in a group. Outdoor common spaces with seating spaces. This is a playground in DC. We're looking at doing some sort of unique play structure or play area for kids here. So there'll be an official playground. You'll have the splash park on the high school site. You'll have the playground on this site, and then the dog park a little bit further up the road, which I'll show you in a moment. And all of that is intended to make the area active and exciting for people walking to and from the metro. There'll be at Haycock and what's currently the Metro Access Road, what will for future be the Commons. There's this area that's a little bit depressed from the road, about 6 feet. That's about a half an acre. And throughout all of our community outreach on the high school site and much on the comp plan, we heard a ton about dogs and the fact that there are no dog parks anywhere near here. And so we have a half-acre space where we'll be doing a regional dog park essentially, as well as a sport court, potentially just a bigger dog park, depending on what the community wants to see there and the demand. But it creates the ability for you to grab your coffee, walk up, stroll through the Commons, and spend your afternoon or an hour at the dog park, walk back through, play with your kid at the playground, and it becomes an engaging community or community space for the local community to kind of call their living room area. And then at the Transit Plaza itself, it's a little bit more hardscape, a little bit more comfortable space to make sure that, because it's going to be a heavier use space, you'll have transit infrastructure, bus shelters, much seating. And this is from Brookland, from some of the WMATA images. The tree preserve zone is between the existing residential and the proposed. And that tree preserve zone may be left just the way it is, but we're looking at creative ways to create a trail through it so that you can, if you're going to the dog park, you can actually kind of walk through this portion of the tree preserve to get out to the dog park if you don't want to walk up on the street, let your dog run around a little bit more. Stormwater management is something that we're very focused on. There is a stormwater management pond on the site, but the new development that largely serves the local community. The new development will be serving its own stormwater management on site through a mixture of bioretention vaults, bioretention at-grade facilities, tree pits that will be treating, green roofs on the buildings that you're seeing throughout. And so this will be further developed during the CDP process, but we are very well aware of stormwater management issues in the area and focused on that. And what this delivers, as you can see, this is the whole 40 acres now. The high school is building their new fields. About half of the high school's current kind of group sports players are county residents, and so that will continue in the leagues there. The city will have its own high school plaza, the Commons going up the center and through the Virginia Tech site with kind of the capstone residential building, linear park going all the way to the metro, the dog park off in the distance. Transportation wise, I'm almost done. The last 2 slides, because I know this is taking a while. So this is just the existing conditions of where we're at today. And as I mentioned, the intersection of 7 and Haycock is difficult today. It's an E, which is a level of service. But what that really means is that if you're at that intersection on average, you're waiting about 60 to 70 seconds to go through that intersection. And that frustrates people and it backs up traffic. The other intersection that's difficult is Great Falls and Haycock. That is operating at a level of service D, about 40 to 50 seconds of wait time. Most of the other intersections work quite well. And so this blue bar is the existing conditions today. That's showing in the AM and the PM how long you're waiting at that intersection. The orange is if no development happens, just the background. So general background traffic growth, which may or may not happen, obviously, depending on how people decide to commute in the future and how many people work from home. The gray bar that you're seeing is traffic with the by right uses. So if WMATA and Virginia Tech were to develop per the current comp plan before a new comp plan was changed, this is the type of traffic you would ultimately see at those intersections, about an 85-second wait and about a 75-second wait in the afternoon. The yellow bars is the full development that we're proposing with no mitigation efforts at all. So just nothing changing the roads. And the green is the full development with mitigations. So the development essentially pays for various infrastructure improvements that then lower the amount of time that you're waiting in your car. As you can see in the PM, we actually get it well below what it is existing today by about almost 20 seconds. In the afternoon, in the morning, we're not able to get it quite back to existing conditions yet because of that background. And so the big question is, how do people commute in the future? How do we get people out of their cars? How many people work from home? Some of this background might go away, but we're certainly mitigating the effects of the proposed development, which is really, really helpful and helps that intersection. So that's the overall presentation. I'll just close as a reminder. May 11th is a community meeting, important to be involved. If any of these things are areas that you are excited about or concerned about, want to make sure your voice is heard. Planning Commission on June 16th, same thing, letters of support, as well as emails are important, as well as testifying. And the Board of Supervisors on July 13th is when hopefully this will be approved. My contact information is here, Goldman at EYA.com, as well as my associate, our development manager, Amy. And Sonia is going to share this presentation. So if any of you want to get in touch with me and have any questions, you'll have that information. And with that, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. That's great. And so, the next part, we're going to go into question and answers. And so I would encourage anybody who has questions to put them in the chat and send them to Stuart. He's the one that's sort of collecting them, and we'll sort of work through what questions we're going to sit here and we'll pose. So Stuart, if you want to kick us off.
Hey, everybody, here we go. I didn't clean up behind me, so that's why we have our CSG logo here. That way you can't forget who we are. And we are at smartergrowth.net. Sonia will post that in the chat so you know where to find us. Let me start off with some of the questions. We had a couple that were provided to us in advance of the meeting. They get extra points, I guess. The first one, though, is a good question, but one that really will have to be addressed to the City of Falls Church. But it is a good question. And that was the fact that the city has talked for a long time about adding more sidewalks, especially for safe routes to school, safe walks to school for children. And one of the challenges the city has is a lot of very old roads that were built before sidewalks were required. In many cases, they're very narrow. They also have beautiful trees. And anybody who's lived in Falls Church, I believe, has probably been, knows that there's been a bit of a debate about where we can put them. The goal was to try to put them on at least one side of the street. It's probably an ongoing effort, a combination of complicated planning and obviously looking out for things like trees, as well as funding issues. And we all need to be, I'm going to answer this one basically, as you can see this. We all need to be pushing VDOT and localities to focus more on safe walking and biking on our streets rather than just widening everything. The second transportation question was about traffic on Haycock Road and the question is, and referring to the fact that Commons Avenue will provide a parallel option to Haycock, especially for local traffic. However, without Virginia Tech involved, will that road still be built, Commons Avenue? You might have mentioned this, Evan, but go ahead and respond again.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, obviously Virginia Tech is their own private property owner or public agency, but private property owner. So we can't force them to build a road on their property. But everything they've said is that their intent is to do so. They've submitted a letter to the county saying that they're willing to do that, even in the current state of the existing project. We always designed Commons so that it could be built, keeping their existing building and parking in place, because we knew that that existing academic building needed to stay while they built the replacement building. And so it always had to be able to continue operations. So it's been designed so it can work. And then most importantly, the City of Falls Church and Virginia Tech were able to receive a grant from the state of Virginia for about a grant of about $10 million was put out that the state and Virginia Tech will likely receive, that will actually fund hard costs to build the road. So if the budget's there, Virginia Tech is willing to do it, the expectation is that road will get built. The rest of the infrastructure is obviously being provided as part of the high school and the WMATA development. And so overall, you'll get the infrastructure that's needed to make the network work.
And there's a related question, which is if the road is built through there, there's also a current Virginia Tech parking lot between there and the school area, the school fields. Is that going to remain, and will that have public access in any way?
No, so the parking would remain as Virginia Tech parking. It's gated. Obviously, people can park there and pay the fee, even if they're not going to Virginia Tech necessarily. But that parking would remain until they're ready to redevelop the site.
Okay. Another related question is about Chestnut, and you're noting that part of it is a pretty narrow. Honestly, we would call it a shared street where it's one lane through and cars have to pause for each other. They're wondering if specific improvements are planned for Chestnut Street and the intersection of Chestnut and Gordon's.
Yeah, so let me share my screen again. Give me 1 second. There we go. So I'm just going to go back a few slides. I apologize. You know what? Let me do this the old-fashioned way. So the intersection here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so yeah, so the design improvements that are being proposed here are at Chestnut and Route 7. I can't speak to Gordon's. That's kind of a separate issue. I know the county is, I believe the county has been working with the local residents there in general on that whole neighborhood because there are issues there with pedestrian safety. But the reason why we were able to successfully close Chestnut here was this concept that, the cut through traffic that's cutting through today and waiting here to make a left turn, that's kind of speeding down that little narrow 16-foot section of Chestnut is one of the issues we heard loudly and clearly from the neighbors is a problem. At the same time, this intersection was really critical to make the whole traffic system work and not to back up Haycock and 7 even worse, and also for the commercial property owners to have access. So what this does, since this is now private, everything from this side over is private, Waze, Google Maps, some of these other wayfinding systems will not take cars down this direction because it will read as a dead end. Those of you who live in the neighborhood will know that you can obviously go through the shopping center and make a left turn. And so it provides access for you to get in and out of your own neighborhood without necessarily promoting a lot of cut through traffic. So it's kind of a unique traffic calming solution that some people in the know will use, but not certainly the vast majority of cut through traffic folks that are there today. And that provides the access to this area, to the shopping center, but should stop some of the cut through traffic that's there today. I can't speak to the other intersection because that's kind of outside of our purview.
Well, thank you for answering that. And I'll say as an aside, you're lucky actually to have a quote shared street down at that end, or a yield street, they call it, where one car is to let the other come through. Those are naturally slower streets and calm traffic and don't show the time advantage often that through the systems. Yeah. There is a
Stuart, can I just add a little bit on the residential issues as we get further into these communities? I know that there are concerns, and I know this neighborhood has expressed, the need for sidewalks or speed humps, as other neighborhoods have. And I know Fairfax County is, exploring as part of their residential traffic administration program, and that's sort of their traffic calming. So they do studies, and then they can sort of decide what infrastructure will help calm those streets based on the volume and what kind of, if there's speeding problems and so forth. And I think, hearing a lot of that feedback again, this is why that West Falls Church active transportation plan was being proposed by FCDOT, was because they were hearing similar issues all around. So they wanted to look at this comprehensively. So both Fairfax County has a program for addressing this that I think a lot of these neighborhoods are already exploring, but also there's going to be the opportunity moving forward to really dig into this West Falls Church plan, that we can really help make sure that they get the safety they need in those communities.
Thank you. There's a question which we may not have the answer to, but may relate to that follow-on active transportation study. Will there be a capital bike share station between 29 and 50 and Annandale Road and Marshall? So looking at using, enhancing the availability of capital bike share, especially, to get to the station for a commute.
Annandale Road.
Yeah, you know what? That's my neighborhood.
Okay.
That's where I was actually trying to clarify with the person who had posted the question, because it's not Marshall Road. I'm thinking Marshall Street. And so this is the community just on the other side of the city, if I'm understanding it correctly. But it's really this idea of having the better connectivity of the bike share stations. The city of Falls Church has deployed a number of stations around the city. Fairfax County is starting to do it as well. They put a number in the Dunloring area, and they're also working to connect along, like in Tysons and Reston. And so as those projects come online, they continue to try to expand that system. And believe me, I'm very much looking for, right now, just down at Maple Street and Route 29, there is a bike share station. So that's within the city of Falls Church. And so eventually this will expand out, particularly as we build out the bike infrastructure. And
there will also be a bike share at the high school site as part of the redevelopment here. So for folks that, that'll give them the ability to get back and forth pretty quickly to the metro. But as a DC resident, we have bike share everywhere, like on almost every street corner. It is great once you guys get it fully in Fairfax County.
Yeah, it's awesome. And the more we have it to connect to these places, the more valuable the system is. But it still is in the process of being built out. I know the county is trying to expand it, and probably will, especially with redevelopment like this. And I was going to offer that along Route 29, there has been recent investments. They found some funding to do some transit enhancements. And so perhaps they could start looking at bike share in that section as well.
Yeah, bike share was a revelation to me when it started, because you just realize you suddenly do not need a lock, and you don't need to worry about your bike going missing, wandering off, because you've used a shared bike and put it into one of those docks. It's pretty cool. And 3 parking questions. I'm going to ask them all together and let Evan respond. On the one hand, one person said it seems overparked, and someone else asked, well, what parking ratio are you using? And then the related question is, will the WMATA garage be used as shared parking now?
Great questions, all 3 of them. Okay, so I'll give you the overview. The WMATA site today has 2,000 parking spaces. They used to be fully utilized before the Silver Line opened. When the Silver Line opened, I think it's been 5-6 years now, the parking utilization rate went down to about 40 to 50%. And so they're using anywhere from kind of 800 to 1,100 spaces on their most busy day out of 2,000. So that was part of what allowed this development to start being thought about, because WMATA has all this excess parking sitting there unused on a regular basis. So anyway, as a result, we will be retaining 1,400 of those 2,000 spaces for commuters, 1,200 of which will be in the parking garage, and those will be dedicated WMATA park and ride users Evenings and weekends, that parking can be used as overflow retail parking, which is actually great. One of the biggest issues of getting good restaurants is on a Saturday night, you need a lot of parking for them, and the rest of the time that parking sits empty. And so that's perfect, and that provides revenue for WMATA. They will keep the north parking lot, which is 200 spaces up against Route 66 as well. And then when we come to build our phase 3, which probably won't happen for 7 or 8 years, we can either, if there's a demand, we can replace those spaces. If not, WMATA can work with the county and potentially get rid of those as well, which would bring their parking down to 1,200. That will obviously be based upon demand. For the buildings themselves, we will be asking for a parking reduction for townhomes to some extent because we're in a shared use environment with street parking right at the metro. So we'll have 2 spaces for every unit plus a little bit of visitor parking versus 2.7, which is the county requirement. And quite frankly, if there's a lot of support for going lower, we believe you could have people here that would be fine with 1 space, but the county requirement is pretty high. The multifamily buildings are going to ask for a reduction to 0.9 spaces per unit. And so I'd say in another jurisdiction, there would be willingness this close to metro to probably go lower to 0.7 or 0.75. But I don't think the county is quite there from a parking reduction perspective yet. But to the extent you are a parking advocate, and that's something you want to get involved in, we agree that shared parking and reduction of parking is something that this site probably could benefit from.
Terrific. There is a related parking question, which it relates to the parking on neighborhood streets. What will be done to discourage or eliminate parking on neighborhood streets? And I assume you mean the streets outside this particular redevelopment.
Yeah, so if to the extent that becomes a problem, that's an issue. Working, the county does it. There are ways to make sure that the parking on those streets could be potentially zoned for residents, but most of these kind of mixed use projects that are being planned this close to transit, if anything, it's the opposite. They have empty parking. The Rushmark building, quite frankly, by the Harris Teeter is a great example where they have, dramatically more parking than they need in that building. And there's tons of parking that sits vacant just because the majority of people renting a studio 1-bedroom apartment right near transit these days don't even have a car. A lot of these people are taking Uber whenever they need to use Uber. They take transit when they need to take transit. They do a car share if they have a trip. And so the way people use cars is changing dramatically. And so, the jurisdictions are kind of catching up to what the trends are, which is that there just isn't as much demand for parking these days, especially for millennials. So that I understand the concern. And quite frankly, if we were building this 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I think that would be a very valid concern. The changes in parking patterns that we're seeing all throughout the region are just not really coming that way. We're building a project working through an approval at Tacoma Park Metro, which is similarly suburban to this area. And the city isn't allowing us to build more than 1 space per 3 units. So to give you a sense of scale, and that's really what the demand is for a lot of these apartment buildings. Most younger renters just aren't owning cars.
And, in a way that is very encouraging. I mean, for one thing, it's going to save people a lot of money. Families could save money for kids' college education. Young professionals starting out will certainly save money. They talk about how young people are not getting driver's licenses until later in age, if at all.
Right.
And we have a climate crisis. So if we can create these great walkable communities of which the City of Falls Church has become a real recent but leader in the region, joining Arlington, DC, and Alexandria in this. I think they're doing just amazing work on walkability, and this is essentially part of the city as well.
Yeah.
And Fairfax is working hard to catch up. If we are going to address climate, we need to try to reduce the emissions for transportation, and walkable community is a great part of it.
Yep.
Let me jump to another related climate question: solar. Will there be solar on the roofs?
We have not even remotely gotten that far along in design yet. We do have requirements in our agreements with WMATA, we have requirements for almost all the buildings to be LEED Gold.
Explain LEED to people.
Oh, sorry, LEED is Leadership in Energy, Environment, and Design, which requires a whole bunch of environmental measures to make your buildings healthier and better for the environment. Solar can be part of that. So we haven't gotten to the part yet. That'll be in the next phase when we do our CDP, our conceptual development plan, is when you start picking the different types of things that you'll do to achieve that LEED. We also have to do lead neighborhood development. So that gets into stormwater management and site design and parks and open space, tree canopy coverage, things of that sort. But yeah, we haven't gotten far enough along to figure out what credits we'll be doing. We definitely will be doing green roofs. And one of the struggles we've been having with solar on buildings that we've been working on is when you maximize green roofs, you're taking area that could be solar. And it's very difficult to do both. There are some new systems being invented that allow you to try to do both. But right now, if you do solar, you either burn or you cover the green, which then means the green doesn't thrive. And so, you have to kind of pick and choose. Is it stormwater management? Is it energy, which is the better issue on that site? But that'll be something that we get into during CDP.
So that hits a related question, showing the complexity of these projects, which relates to parks and open space and pervious surface. So this person excited about a walkable transit-oriented community like is being proposed here, but notes that Mosaic itself nearby has some issues with lack of green space, and some of those focus on using AstroTurf. So what will you be doing to provide porous surfaces, and well-connected green space? I think you're trying to do it, but I think there's a question here of whether you've got enough.
Yep, perfect. So I'll share, give me 1 second and let me go to the slide that'll be most helpful to show this. I can go all the way to the beginning, actually. Go to here. Okay, view, zoom. Okay, so I'll give you a little background. Before I became a partner and owner at EYA, I had been with Federal Realty for about 8 years working on mixed-use projects, including a big one called Pike and Rose. And Federal over years has probably built more mixed-use projects than anyone in the country: Shirlington, Pike and Rose, Pentagon Row, Bethesda Row. And they'd always tried to do kind of very active green spaces, park spaces that were heavily used. And over time, they ended up converting some of them into turf just because they got destroyed as grass because of the amount of usage. So what we decided here on the whole 40 acres, the vast majority of this is true green space as well as hardscape spaces. The one green on the City of Falls Church site is being proposed as AstroTurf, but it is a permeable turf, which is kind of a newer material versus some of the older turfs that didn't help with stormwater management runoff. And also a lot of these turf materials are actually getting quite good from the feel of the grass. They actually feel more like real grass. And we're doing it because we expect that space to be heavily utilized for movie nights, yoga parties, kids running around. And we want to make sure it's attractive all year long and it doesn't become a dirt mud bowl. So that one space will be. The rest of it will be landscaped, will be lush. We'll have the pollinator gardens. We'll have a green space here. The dog park obviously will be natural. We're actually going to keep the vast majority of trees there. So the dog park, the trees themselves will be integrated into the dog park. So there is thought going into how do we create a natural environment for most of the site. And then there will be the one space where there would be some AstroTurf.
I just noted that we've got just about 5 more minutes. I'm going to put in the chat the information about the public meeting coming up hosted by the county about the West Falls Church plan. Let me put that in the chat for you all. And hopefully that'll be clear and readable with a link to the registration for that meeting. Let's see, while I was doing that, comment was great. Keep the walls minimized. Any other questions? If not, again, community meetings coming up on May 11th. Sonia, you might put up the slide with the meeting schedule. And we'll do wrap up. And thank you all.
Yes, thank you all so much for coming. Great presentation. Thank you, Evan. And I thought the questions and dialogue were really helpful. So the next steps, right? We've been talking about this community meeting coming up May 11th at 7 next week. Stuart just dropped the info in the chat. Please join if you have more specific questions for staff, and just speak up and show some support for this type of redevelopment, because it and all of its many benefits, because I think it will really help put it over the edge and over the top. And then Planning Commission public hearing coming up in June 16th, Board of Supervisors public hearing July 13th. I will send out a follow-up email that includes the presentations and link to the recording, as well as probably listing out more of these engagement opportunities, just to make sure that it's all in your hands and so you know how to get involved, which we would greatly appreciate. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I put my email address here, sonia@smartergrowth.net. And that is it for me. So thank you all so much. And perfect. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see folks. I always feel like I can't see everybody, but thanks for everybody's attention. All right.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks so much.